Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon to never miss an update.
So I looked also at the IIM education, and I thought it would actually be too difficult for me to get in. I think the quality of the students there is absolutely amazing, and the bar is very high.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Conversations on Quarantine. The conventional business logic is that business is business. Whether you're selling detergent soaps, or whether you are running an addictive social media platform, or whether you're doing something for healthcare, everything is just business. The thing is that inside IIM we think that there are businesses and then there are businesses, and there's a difference between the two, which is why it gives me a lot of pleasure to be talking to Antoine today, who runs a very interesting business. He's trying to do something really important in the healthcare space, and he's chosen to start with India. So really excited to be talking to Antoine today. Antoine, welcome to Conversations in Quarantine.
I'm very happy to be here today.
Okay, Antoine, to begin with, your journey started in beautiful, fancy Paris in France. You graduated from ParisTech some time ago, and then you were thrown into this big bad world. You were working in the factories of the world. You worked in India, you worked in Kazakhstan, you worked in Nigeria. What was that like, fresh out of Paris Tech, working in all these kinds of countries and doing very interesting projects? Could you take us through that first?
For sure, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because at ParisTech University, I learned how to critically think, how to think in a very theoretical manner. Learned engineering, did the master's there, but it was pretty much Europe focused. And early on, still as a student, I decided to go explore the world, and that took me, as a student, that took me to Hong Kong, that took me to Australia, etc. And when I graduated, I decided to keep on that exploration, and that's why I joined a firm called Areva and decided to go explore the world with them. And that took me to, as you mentioned, to Niger, that took me to Kazakhstan, that took me to India as well, where I spent quite a bit of time, about, I think, 5 years all in one. But I also spent some time in, let's say, more developed or more mature countries like Germany, for example, or Finland. And one of my intent by doing that was to explore different environments, different culture, while working on interesting renewable technologies and low carbon energies. And a key takeaway from this experience was to learn to adjust to new cultures. What I very soon realized is that working in Germany with engineers over there, or building, let's say, the largest solar power plants in India, is a very different environment.
Right. So let's come to your MBA decision now. What were the campuses that were in your consideration set, and why was INSEAD picked by you as the one that you want to go to?
So I was considering INSEAD. It was actually not at the first place, not top of my choice, because I had been for years thinking that I would do a business education in the US. So could do something like the MIT, where it's very technically oriented, or even Berkeley. And I also considered, because I had spent a bit of time, IIM in Ahmedabad, because long time ago I had been there and spent some time with a professor named Anil Gupta, working on grassroots innovations. So I was quite aware of the quality of the education in the different IIMs of India. So I look at these different opportunities, and I realized that the people I came across with during my career were actually people from INSEAD. And I started wondering why. And I discovered that US universities are actually quite focused on US. So if you want to, let's say, shift there and build a career there, it makes a lot of sense. And they have most universities, but the quality of the MIT education is top notch. So I looked also at the IIM education, and I thought it would actually be too difficult for me to get in. I think the quality of the students there is absolutely amazing. and the bar is very high. I had heard of a few, let's say, French people studying there in Bangalore and in Ahmedabad, and I decided this was actually too complicated for me to apply to, too competitive. And what I realized is I was actually left with INSEAD, and INSEAD were the MBA graduates I had met during my career, and I had met them across different cultures, across different environments. So I did some digging, and I realized that INSEAD is actually the most diverse, the most culturally open MBA school that you can find in the world. And I found that fascinating. I also digged into the detail of the curriculum, and I realized that this was a fast-paced program that takes a year to go through. And it's very intense, very multicultural. And the last bit I think I looked at was who were the graduates from INSEAD. And what I realized is a lot of them were actually now entrepreneurs. So right after INSEAD or after a few years, they had started building businesses and pretty successful businesses across industries. And I thought that this was the place where I should go for my MBA.
Okay. You mentioned that you felt that the selection was tougher over there to crack. Was it the GMAT versus CAT situation, the entrance exams, or was it the, just the kind of profile of students that get into these business schools? What was it that you thought was made you feel that it will be a more difficult process to get into the IIMs?
Very frankly speaking, from my co-students at INSEAD that came from, let's say, the Indian contingent, I felt that they were truly amazing in terms of experience, in terms of what they had achieved in life, but also just in terms of them as human beings. And I felt that when I consider IIM, that both in terms of scores to get in, it's a very, very competitive process. So the applicants really focus on getting the top-notch, GMAT scores before they apply. So I would need to compete with this kind of other applicants. And I thought that would be a lot of work on one hand. I think the MBA market in India is well developed, and India has a broad education system that pushes people up. And it makes it very competitive at the top. So whoever has been able to get into one IIM across the country is actually not part of the top 1%, but we're talking about the top 0.1%. And I found that intimidating. So in the end, that's why I focused on INSEAD.
So for you, where was that decision made that you're going to pursue entrepreneurship after your MBA?
I do understand that going for an MBA actually brings in first quite a bit of financial pressure, but also peer pressure. People expect you to join a top firm and to have a brilliant career there. So going for entrepreneurship is not the obvious choice. However, and that's how I thought about it, is if you have that inner drive of building a business, building something for yourself and then scale that, then you should do it, because the earlier you start, the more successful or the higher your chances are to be successful. That's how I thought early on during my MBA journey.
I want to understand, finding a co-founder is like finding a life partner, right? And that's another thing that happens on a B school campus, that you find someone interesting and then you try to woo them and get to know them, and then you find that chemistry and then you make things work. Similarly, you did that with your co-founders. So take us through that process. Like, how did you guys meet up on campus? What were the initial sparks that flew between you, and how did you guys discover that, maybe there's a future that we can see together?
So I'm going to give you that very personal story of ours. Prabdeep, Jose, and myself actually met even before we had started the MBA. It was right before. We went on a trip together with a few other friends from the MBA in the south of France, where I'm from. And I was taking that group of, I think we were 12, around the south of France and showing them, the different parts of that region by the sea in Provence. We went to Nice, we went to Cannes, etc. And I was just being a tourist guide. But on that trip, Prabdeep and Jose were there as well. And we became close friends. We had a lot of fun together. We explored that part of the country. Jose is a musician, so he started playing music, and we clicked very well as individuals, as people. And it's only after that, through our discussions in the evenings at the dinner table or at the coffee machine during the MBA, that we realized that we had, let's say, similar interest. So we first aligned on our relationship, and that was through that trip. We became friends, and then by sharing our stories, we realized that we had that interest that we would focus on together. And in the very first place, I was kind of the driving force on starting a business, because I really wanted to do that during my INSEAD journey. And Prabdeep and Jose realized that there could be something interesting to do together, and that team dynamic that we had to build as friends would be a good asset for us moving forward. And that's how we got started.
3 skills and 3 attitudes you picked up during your MBA at INSEAD.
I think I reinforced critical thinking a lot at INSEAD, because you're constantly bombarded with opportunities, with new ideas. Some have no legs, and some are great opportunities. And you constantly need to critically assess all these opportunities and select. If you don't do that, you fall into the FOMO. You fear of missing out this class or this social activity, and it becomes a struggle. So you need that critical thinking aspect, and I developed that quite a bit. The second one is the strategic thinking around a business, which I came in with that technical background of mine and very industrial background. And I started thinking at INSEAD, thinking as a shareholder, which is a very different thinking. On one side, you're on the operating company, but on the other side, if you think like a shareholder, you think at the top, you think what's best for the value of the equity, for example, or what's best for all the stakeholders. And it's a much broader thinking around an organization. I think the third one I developed, and I was quite late in the MBA, is kind of the organizational behavior or the people side of things. By having spent a year with people from 65 different countries, I think that really sharpened my ability to talk to different cultures and to bond with them. So that's the third one, I would say. So if you're an MBA student, if you just graduated, if you're 5 years post your MBA, and you think that deep inside you're an entrepreneur, then you should get started ASAP.